Jumpin' In on Manx Radio.
With Howard and Chris Kane.
Hello.
Good evening.
And welcome. And here we are jumping into 2025 already. Can you believe it? A bit of a special to start off. It is Jumping In 2025 with myself, H.
And me, Chris. Yes, the first of 25. Who can believe it? And this year, it's not the first pick of our shows of the year, as you might have been expecting. That'll be coming up in the next show. But tonight is a look back at a different kind. Although there were some great new arrivals on the jazz scene during last year, there were always some significant departures. And tonight, we'd like to give a tribute to those musicians, some of whom have passed away in the last few weeks. So without further ado, let's get straight into the show with one of the biggest names in pretty much any field of music you could choose. Trumpeter, band leader, composer, arranger, mentor and record producer Quincy Jones. A man who came to prominence over half a century ago and never even really left the stage, including all three of Michael Jackson's award-winning albums. Here he is, however, with his jazz hat on, directing the Gil Evans Orchestra along with the George Grunt's Concert Jazz Band live at Montreux in what was to be the last live performance of Miles Davis. Here's Springville. Springsville there, the great Quincy Jones fronting a band like no other with Miles and a 50-piece band which has never been recorded before, live at Montreux Jazz Festival on the 8th of July in 1991 in what turned out to be Miles's last recording. He'd never looked back on his career, or indeed he always had a thing of not revisiting older material, but he was quite seriously ill when Quincy met with him at his New York apartment. A psychic had been brought along at Miles's request, and when one of the psychic's dice fell into Miles's lap, he took that as a sign that he should play at this concert. The concert was also a tribute to Gil Evans, who died a couple of years earlier. Not surprisingly, upon release, the album went straight to the top of the Billboard charts, with one critic stating it to be simply the most exquisite music of tragedy this side of a New Orleans funeral. Don't be mistaken, though, this ain't no party, nor is it a career-summing work of miraculous late-life virtuosity. It's something even rarer, an almost unbearably honest musical expression without apology of shame, of weakness, age, and pain. Whatever, it's a fitting tribute to Miles and indeed to Quincy.
Certainly is, and yeah, a massive loss, that one. Happily, so many of these artists have left some great recorded legacies, including our next artist who passed away on the 12th of December, but the wonderful age of 97, Marshall Salal, born in Algiers in Algeria in August of 1927, and started off on clarinet and saxophone and then piano, and his mother encouraged him a lot, who was an opera singer, his mother, and said, yes, get on there. But he went on to the piano and played for 50, 60, 70 years. He almost lose track. I think he almost lose track as well. I thought to get a feel of the breadth of his playing, which stayed as fresh as a daisy to the end, we'd hear a little bit early on and a little bit later on. So first off, Marshall Salal at Newport, 63, with Teddy Kotick bass and the great Paul Motion at the drums with a version of Poinciana. And then I think his last ever live concert, as far as I recall, which was live at the Salle Gaveau in 2019. And hear him doing one of his own compositions, Sir Jack. mere 56 years, I think, separate those two performances. Marshall Salal, who passed away at the age of 97 on the 12th of December, first off in 1963 at the Newport Festival. It said it was a live recording. It's a bit of a fake, actually, in that it was, I think, one of those meant to be a live recording, but they actually recorded it in the studio and dubbed on applause afterwards. And then the second one, 2019, at the Salle Gaveau. And as he says in the liner notes, when I walked onto the stage on January the 23rd, 2019, I didn't yet know I'd decided not to play the piano anymore after that concert, more than 70 years after my debut. To maintain a certain level, the instrument requires daily attention, delicacy, brutality, and especially energy. And I've lived with those demands all my life, with the joy of seeing progress and musical advancement. In essence, he was saying he still thought he was playing really well and wanted to quit while he was at the top. And frankly, he still was. We saw him when he was a mere 80-something or other with I think it was the Motown Brothers, and you couldn't tell who was 20 and who was 80. It was amazing.
Yes, fantastic, and what energy on the stage, unbelievable. Another great writer, arranger and saxophonist was the wonderful Benny Golson, who had a pretty good innings at 95, coming to note originally more as a writer than a performer with the bands of Lionel Hampton and Dizzy Gillespie back in the 1950s, before going solo and then co-founding the Jazz Tet with trumpeter Art Farmer in 1959. Throughout the 60s and 70s, he was pretty fully occupied as an arranger for TV and film, but he and Art reformed the Jazz Tet in 1982. He was also a regular in Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers, including the seminal Moanin' recording. Many of Golson's original tunes became jazz standards, including I Remember Clifford, Blues March, Stablemates, Whisper Not, Killer Joe, and Along Came Betty from Moaning. And here she is, Along Came Betty. The late great Benny Golson on tenor there, along with Along Came Betty, with Lee Morgan on trumpet, Bobby Timmons on the piano, Jamie Merritt on bass, and of course Art Blakey at the drums. One of my favourite iterations of the Messengers, I thought, but with so much talent on show, it's really hard to choose from any of them.
You're right there, must admit. Choose any you like, you won't go far wrong. You're listening to Jumpin' In into 2025 with Chris and myself, H. And we thought it was only fitting to start the year when there have been, sadly, and particularly in the last 2 or 3 months, we lost so many great jazz players, particularly from the modern end of the spectrum, including just after Christmas, in fact, on the 28th of December, this man, Barra Phillips. Still sounding pretty fresh for a track which was recorded 45 years ago, give or take the odd month, 1980. Just called Part 1 from Barra Phillips' album on ECM, Journal Violent 2. He did several of those. Well, he kept doing them throughout his year. I mean, Journal Violent 1 he recorded in 1968 and is down as pretty much the first ever solo bass jazz album. There was nothing else on that at all, just him. And I think he certainly got up to Journal Violent 8 or 9 in the ensuing decades.
9, definitely.
Track 9, yeah, there were an awful lot. Some, again, in that case, Journal Violent 2, Barra Phillips on bass, of course, John Sermon, recognisable on sax and also synth, and Aina Kamanis on voice, and they worked together several times over the years. Yes, Barra, just after Christmas, saw something about it, suggesting that he wasn't well, and then he died on the 28th of December at the age of 90. Born in the States, of course, but lived in the south of France since the 1970s. Although I read somewhere he was thinking about returning to the States, whether it's because he wanted to go back to his homeland as he got towards the end of his life and just didn't quite get around to it. I don't know, but he'd been there for a long time, 50 years or so in France. Played in the 60s with Eric Dolphy, Jimmy Giuffre, Archie Shepp, Lee Konitz, you name them. And then, of course, in the 70s, famously, in the trio with John Sermon, Stu Martin at the drums, very much the free end of things. Great friend of Evan Parker back in the day as well. And Evan tells a great story of them walking home after a gig in the pouring rain. And he was absolutely dripping as he went home to Holland Park. He must have been doing all right, although Holland Park probably wasn't fancy then. And saying, yeah, you know, I just dig this weather.
Yeah, man likes the rain, what can you say? More from Art Blakey, this time with his quintet, although it's pretty much really the Messengers again, from A Night at Birdland, Volume 3, featuring a great alto player, the wonderful Lou Donaldson, who passed away in November. Not to be confused with the original 1954 Volume 3, which was on a 10-inch LP. In 1984, A Night at the Birdland Volume 3 came out with previous release outtakes from the first 3 volumes, now on CD as Volumes 1 and 2. I hope you're following. Anyway, from that album, here's a Donaldson original, Lou's Blues. Lou Donaldson there blowing up a storm on his own tune, Lou's Blues. He passed away at the grand age of 98, having declared his retirement at 92. However, he then went on to appear at annual tribute shows for him at Dizzy's Club in Manhattan, up to and including his 97th birthday. He was perhaps best known for Alligator Boogaloo, a track on his 1967 album of the same name, which went on to be his biggest hit. He was quite surprised at the chart's success, and he said at the time, "We made the date and we were 3 minutes short. I said I don't have no more material. And the guy said, just play anything for 3 minutes so we can fill out the time. So I just made up this riff and naturally the guys could follow it. It's the only damn thing on the record that's sold."
That's often the way. That's jazz for you, yeah. Often the way it goes. Often the way it goes. It's Chris and H with you with Jumping Into 2025. A look back at some of the fantastic jazzers who have moved on to bandstands new, as they say. Hopefully we'll catch up with them in the fullness of time. It's going to be a great gig, one way or another. There's an increasingly number of great people playing up there. And another one will be joining them, Zakir Hussain, the tabla maestro. There was confusion that it was sort of posted that he died. Then it was posted saying, no, he hadn't. He was just very ill. And then, sadly, a few days later, it was absolutely confirmed that he had passed away at the age of 73. Very young, really, in the scale of things, particularly compared to Barra Phillips and Marshall we were listening to earlier on, who made it to 90 quite happily. So,
98 for Donaldson.
Yeah, 98 for Lou, my lord, yes. And, sadly he had lung disease and didn't last as long as was hoped. The last time I saw him, he was playing with Shakti a year and a half ago. And one of the first times I really enjoyed his playing outside of Shakti was in the 1986 album, I think it was, under his own name on ECM, just called Making Music.
One, two, three, 1, 2, 3.
Taka-dimmi-ta, taka-dida-dum, taka-dimmi-ta, taka-dida-dum, taka-dida-da, taka-dida-dum, ta, ka-taka-dida-dum, ka-taka-dida-dum, ka-taka-dida-da-dum.
Just a little hint of the wizardry of tableau maestro Zakir Hussain, who passed away last month at the terribly young age of just in his 70s, 73. First from his own album, Making Music, on ECM. We heard You and Me, Hussain with his long-term friend and colleague John McLaughlin. And then from just a year or two back, they were touring the last time I was privileged to see them in Hammersmith with Shakti This Moment, the sort of latest reiteration or iteration of the band. And they made it clear then that they didn't expect to ever playing in Britain again, as sadly they never won't. He was a musician first and foremost. He said he was on stage from the age of, well, as young as he can remember, really, played music 24 hours a day, and by the age of 7 was performing alongside his father, Ustad Ali Ratha Khan, who was a tableau maestro himself. Sat in with ABBA, he says, remember sitting on the stage with ABBA and such like. You can get the gist. He was steeped in music and played with pretty much anyone who's anyone, particularly Shakti, particularly John McLaughlin, who describes him as the king, says John. In his hands, rhythm became magic, and I'd have to agree with that. You just had to see him, the speed he had in his fingers and the tunes he could actually play on the left-hand drum of the 2-drum tabla set. You got a little hint of it there. Absolutely amazing stuff. A sad loss, and a sort of one of those guys who crossed all the genres and was a bit of a musical icon within India and around the world, I think.
Around the world, indeed. And in fact, met one of our fine medical consultants over something some years ago, talking to him about jazz. And turns out, I think not only was his godfather, but he taught him to play the tabla. So we've just about got time for a couple of tracks from Quincy to round off the show. Firstly, here's the title track from his 1961 album, The Quintessence. quintessence there from the album of the same name, with a lovely solo from Phil Woods on tenor, who we were fortunate enough to meet at Brecon. Would you like to poke a pic of how many years ago?
Oh my lord, I remember it. I remember him sort of having oxygen when he came off off
the second he came off stage.
Yeah, so I'll be all right with the guys in a minute. Yeah, I'll be fine. It would have been 1990 something.
25 years ago.
Yeah.
25 years ago. Time flies when you're having a good time, as they say, and it has done this evening. Another great sax player in the section with Oliver Nelson there. On Quincy's album was Oliver Nelson, with whom Quincy worked on several TV series, most notably producing what for me was one of the greatest TV themes for Ironside, which was compulsory viewing in our house. I noticed later on the scoring that Nelson did for several shows. He used to regularly cycle through time signatures in the programme, starting in 3, then 4, then 5 and 6 concurrently. You'll have to check out the repeats to be as geeky as we are. We'll be back with our review of the year in the next couple of shows. For now,
easily. Yeah, several shows maybe.
For now, here's Ironside. Take care.
Cheerio and a happy 25.
Indeed.